5, 4, 3.
And we are back, folks, here on the Michigan Insider Sports Talk 1050 WTKA, online at WTKA.com. And you know what we do in the 9 o'clock hour on Thursdays. It is time for the MGoBlog Roundtable. And joining me is the Roundtable crew. The man who started it all at MGoBlog is with us. His name is Brian Cook. Brian, how are you this morning?
I am not a candidate for the Michigan State job.
Man, I got to tell you, you talk about delusions or delusional or delusions of grandeur. I thought Michigan State couldn't be any more delusional than they have been in the past. And I give you this week where I heard names like Marcus Freeman, or Urban Meyer, Marcus Freeman, Josh Heupel was mentioned. Like Josh Heupel was going to leave Tennessee, right? I was like, man, wow. These people are out there. Craig Ross, how you doing this morning?
I'm doing fine. I think Loch Ness Monster, discovered today, will be the new MSU coach. Less delusional than Marcus Freeman, I know that. So,
and Seth Fisher, I know you have Michigan State friends. So
I do. I'm like our resident Michigan State expert. I actually know these people. I know where they're coming from, and that's why I know that they are absolutely getting Urban Meyer, who's going to just bring everybody back in. I want this to happen. I know there's no way in the world, but I want it to happen.
All right, it's going to be Narduzzi. Let's talk Michigan football. Let's talk Michigan football.
Yeah.
Which actually brings Urban Meyer into this story because before the game, fellas, he was pounding the table about how Michigan was in trouble in this game, Brian, because Michigan, he's had this narrative that their schedule is so terrible that they are not going to be ready to play at a championship level. And this was going to be the first example of what he's been talking about because Nebraska has the top-ranked rush defense, and Michigan's not ready because they aren't ready for the 3-3-5, and they're going to go out there and play, and it's going to be a close game. And it wasn't close, Brian.
Well, it was close for a couple minutes.
1 minute.
Yeah, it wasn't. It was a pretty comprehensive dismantling of a run defense that I do think has some pieces. Like I went over this game with a fine-tooth comb, and I think their nose tackle is a legit player. And they run a ton of twists and stunts that were difficult for Michigan to pick up. And they still ground out, 250 yards on the ground. So to do that without a long run, like they didn't rip off a 50-yard run, a 60-yard run in this game. That's really impressive, especially with a new left tackle and, a team that I do think it has a legit run defense. Like I do think that that's for real. Now it's not like 50 yards a game for real, but they're massively improved from last year. So to me, that was something that was revealing. Like I think we learned something about Michigan in this game.
Yeah, I watched Nebraska prior weeks and all of their prior game, and I was really impressed with their run defense. So they're incredibly fast, incredibly quick to the ball. So I was a little surprised at how efficient Michigan was on the ground. I thought they could beat them through the air. I didn't think Michigan was going to lose this game, but I agree with Brian in that the Michigan run offense was quite good. And I don't know what Meyer's talking about. I mean, maybe he is sufficiently delusional to be the head coach at Michigan State. I mean, I guess that's possible.
Well, I mean, you're on a preview show. You say you're gonna
say something.
Predictions wrong. It's not a.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a huge deal.
I think he was high. He was high. That's the excuse.
What?
Yes, he was high. Doesn't he have
like on drugs?
Yes. Like on that heart medication drug that he takes.
Oh, he's high on heart medication.
Yeah. Okay. I don't know if you get. It had to be some kind of excuse to explain how bad he was with that take. It was so bad, Seth, that you had. I mean, a guy who I really don't listen to as far as his commentary is concerned, Brady Quinn, kind of looking over, is like, man, you sound stupid. I'm not going to tell you what. Take.
Let me tell you why Urban Meyer got that wrong. Urban Meyer sometimes forgets that there's a passing game. He forgets that part of the game is a part of it. And Brian pointed out that Michigan's been throwing these dig routes, and like that's a very rare throw in college football because like there's so many people in the area, right? But Michigan can stretch you so far on the top because Roman Wilson's so fast, right? Or Cornelius Johnson's so fast, or you're just worried about Colson Loveland. You gotta have your safety up top, so they can stretch you really far that way. And then their running game, there's just the only way Nebraska could keep up is they could try to throw everybody at it, right? And that's how the 3-3-5 is supposed to work. But if you do that, you're leaving up all this space in the mid-range, and Michigan's just killing people there.
Well, I said last week, and you guys did too. I wasn't the only one, but when they added that read to the duo, it was a game changer. And JJ didn't put one duo in this game, but you saw his impact. And not just on duos. I mean, the first run they ran was a counter that he pulled, and you saw the defensive end. He chased it all the way around. The next play they ran was a duo, and the edge guy is like, now he's paranoid about JJ. On the Khalil Mullings run, the edge guy is paranoid about JJ. And it's like, man, that wrinkle is just, I think it puts everything back on the table as far as Michigan's run game is concerned, because the duo buster isn't busting anymore now that JJ's a threat on the play.
Yeah, and I think that the Michigan's done a really good job of establishing that early. So in both the last two games, they've had JJ keep on the first drive. And you can see for the rest of the game, defensive ends are like, does he have the ball or not? And it doesn't matter that he hasn't kept the ball except that one time. They still have to check it every time. And we saw that on the Mullings touchdown. And there were 3 or 4 other runs in this game where the hesitation from the unblocked defensive end was profitable for Michigan on the ground. And to be able to do that, I don't think JJ even took a hit on his run. He got out of bounds, right? So you're able to convert a first down. You're able to not have your quarterback take a hit, and you're able to improve your run game for the rest of the game. This was the thing that really drove me crazy about the first halves against Ohio State and TCU last year, is just putting that as an option once or twice in the first half gets you benefits for the whole rest of the game. And so not getting to that into the third quarter was a problem. It seems like it's a problem they've definitively fixed. I'm very happy about that.
Yeah, one thing also is that
I want to throw this to you, Craig. Brian, because I want to emphasize, Brian just picked up on a great point.
Yeah.
A terrific point, because we were talking about in that TCU game, man, why aren't they getting outside? They finally do. And the play that got them outside against the 3-3-5 in that game was the counter read. Was the first play, the first run play in this game, the counter read. It's like, so they didn't wait, to your point. They used the pass to help them here presently in this game, Craig.
Yeah, I agree. The one nice thing over the course of the game too was how aggressive JJ was in carrying out the fake when he gave the ball. So he never la-di-dotted. I mean, whether he was a give or not, he was running it the exact same way. So I thought that was impressive, because if you watch other read option teams, that's not always the case. But he, when he handed it off, he was still carrying out his, the keep action. And I feel like that helps a lot on the construction of the play.
There's definitely an art to that. I mean, I always compare it kind of like a basketball game out there. Like where you're the point guard and you're going to have to, you're trying to, you're locking eyes with the guy. You're trying to figure out which way he wants to go, and you're going to decide which way you're going to go, and you're trying to get around him, right? You're trying to beat him out in the lane. And JJ is, the more you practice that, the more you're going to just realize it's not where the defensive that end is. It's not where that guy really stands. It's where his momentum is, where his weight is, which foot has the weight, where is he trying to jump to? And the way teams have been playing Michigan is a lot of times they just bring a guy in from that side, maybe even a safety coming all the way in from the side. But you got to watch his angle, see where he's going. And JJ got him a couple times. I think on that first read was one example where he actually physically was outside, but JJ could tell he's going inside. And just like that, just like a point guard, you see the guy's momentum going the wrong way or he's shifting the wrong way, get him on the wrong foot and you go.
Well, this is something that I complained about with Shea Patterson a lot, where there would be a defensive end who was technically square to him, but was clearly leading to the back and he wouldn't pull it. And last year we saw JJ do that several times, where it's like, okay, this guy is technically squared up, but I know he's keying on quorum and I'm going to get outside. So I think just in terms of his ability to read these things, I think that's definitely something that is an asset for him. And the other thing it lets you do is Michigan is running a lot of power, but where they're pulling both backside guard and tackle, which people call GT. And in the first game, or I don't know, the first time they ran it, the backside defensive end almost got to Donovan Edwards. Like if he had been delayed at all, that would have been a tackle for no gain. And now you're seeing Michigan run that play, and that backside end has to respect JJ, and so you get him blocked for free. And Michigan is actually starting to run some stuff off of that I think is going to be really difficult to defend. They run one power GT in this game where the tight ends and a wide receiver flared out to the left. And I was like, oh, because if the defensive end doesn't check up, JJ keeps, he's got a convoy to the end zone. So you're seeing some things that I think are leaking into the offense. They're expanding it every week. You know, they don't want to show everything, but they do want to keep increasing what they're comfortable with. And we saw our first RPO of the year, I believe, in this game. And it was a hideously misread because he should have given the ball. But
you understand why he threw it.
Yeah,
but there was maybe some buyer's remorse because you're right. It was a split zone RPO. The split zone was a touchdown. Maybe.
Oh my God, yeah, it was. I was like, I know why you're throwing this because it's like an RPO. Like, all right, I got to make sure it's an RPO. And he did that on a couple of his early zone read opportunities this year too, because he was just like, all right, I'm gonna mess this read up because I haven't been doing it. So I think as they incorporate more of that, those reads will get better. And I'm highly, I mean, how could you not be highly encouraged about the state of the offense? After some hiccups early, it feels like Michigan has solidified what they want to do on the offensive line. Feels like they're expanding the playbook. And one thing that was notable in this game is that even after McCarthy exited, they were feeding Donovan Edwards a heavy dose of inside runs. So he had 14 carries in this game, up from 6 last week. And it looked like it was a concerted effort to kind of get him like contact ready, get him cutting inside, get him finding holes, get him back to where he was last year, where after Corum went out, he really got in a rhythm. And so I thought he looked much improved in this game. He didn't really get a whole lot of opportunities to hit the open field, but I thought he was more or less maximizing what was on offer, which was a big improvement from last week.
Brian, how did you see you score out Henderson at left tackle? I mean, I saw some mistakes, but it also seemed more or less solid for most of the game.
Yeah, I mean, so there were a couple of pass protection incidents. One of them, the JJ rollout for the touchdown, I eventually decided was actually pretty bad from him. But there's another one on an overthrow to Colston Loveland where I think Corum bumps into him and prevents him from getting enough on the defensive end to prevent him from hitting McCarthy. Other than that, he was solid in pass protection. As a run blocker, I love his awareness. Like there have been a couple of incidents where Nebraska was twisting and he was able to pick that up. He's a good puller. There are some instances where he was bulled back in a way that I was kind of hoping wouldn't happen for a really experienced guard. But again, I do think Nebraska has a legitimate run defense and they have big boys on that defensive line. So, I think he'll be good. And I think he's still adapting. I think he's still learning. But for him to be where he is mentally right now, I think it's a really encouraging sign.
Yeah, you said something about Donovan getting those inside runs. I thought he was in his press conference really quite revealing because we talked about it before. You got to know his mentality, man. I mean, he is a guy who looks for the big play, sometimes at the expense of the sure play. Right now, it worked last year a lot, especially when he's in a rhythm. Blake's not available. Right, you're even more in a rhythm. Because of that, because you aren't splitting carries, and so that touchdown in the Big Ten championship game is a perfect example. But he said in his press conference this week, he said, the big plays will happen. You got to take the 4 or 5. Eventually, the 40 or 50 will come, just by virtue of sticking with the play design a little bit more. Don't always go looking for the big play. That's a mental adjustment for him. And I thought it was pretty good to kind of hear him say that.
Yeah, and I think it's especially relevant when you're on the same team as Blake Corum, right? Because he had 6 carries last week, and so of course he's going to try to hit a home run because he's like, okay, if I run for 80 yards, they're going to give me more carries. And the real thing he needs to do is run for 6 yards consistently, and then he's on the same plane as Corum. So, I feel like he'll get there. What we saw from him last week is not the Donovan Edwards that I think we saw last year, and he didn't really have a lot of ability to have contact in fall camp, and then he's getting limited carries. And I think there was a concerted effort this week in practice and in the game plan to get him right, and I think we're seeing that happen.
Yeah, and I think even though we don't always see it, Seth, result in a target. You see new elements of him in the past. So the RPO was to him. I think that probably had something even to do with it. It was the read was the big deal. I don't think
they were excited to get run their first RPO.
Yeah, it was their first RPO, and the guy that he was hitting was
Yeah.
Donovan. I think that kind of played into it. But they ran him on the Texas route as well. They split him out a couple of times. Like you can see them doing different things on a weekly basis to involve him more in the passing game. They don't always show up in the targets, but it just feels like that's going to be a source of some big plays down the line.
Yeah, I want to go back to that Texas route because that was a play where JJ hits Barner, right? And but Donovan Edwards threatens outside, comes back inside, and the linebacker on him is done. Over. And I want to see that more because I love that little route. I want to see Michigan go back to that little screen they had where the center comes out and it's nothing else, and it's just the Texas route, and then the linebacker gets blocked by the center. I want Donovan Edwards to run that. So I was really happy to see that as well.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, Michigan State's the game for that one because they've been running double A gap blitz again, which is just a murder on that thing.
Yeah.
I also note Blake Corum was out on that play too. And another thing I saw them do, and they didn't end up doing anything with it, but they brought out like a really heavy personnel, like Max Bredesen's out there, and then they spread everybody out, right? And one guy can go with Bredesen, but then you've got somebody on Loveland, then you got somebody on Corum, then you got somebody on Edwards, and it's just like the matchup problems that these guys create. And even on the RPO, Corum was out there running a route on that one too. So if you're trying to deal with all these guys at the same time, it's really stretching in different directions, especially with the way that JJ's reads are stretching you, with the way that Roman Wilson's stretching you downfield. This offense just they're figuring out ways to put their threats in different places on the field just to make it hell on defense to figure out where am I going to cheat to.
I feel like, Craig, we've been talking for a few years about, Roman Wilson. Get Roman Wilson the ball. Get Roman Wilson the ball. Well, look at Roman Wilson getting the ball.
Yeah, the first catch was one of the most remarkable catches I've seen in my life. We were at the game and at that end zone, and I figured it was going to be an incomplete pass. I was a little worried it was going to be an interception. And the next thing I know is they're signaling touchdown, and I had no idea how he caught the ball until we came back to Ann Arbor, and I saw the tape, and it's really one of the more remarkable catches of my lifetime. Certainly among Michigan catches, I can't recall one, but yeah, he's become a phenomenal player. He's extremely fast. I'd never expected his hands to be as good as they have become. So it's really exciting. But one question again, Brian, for you. I don't know if you charted this, but Michigan has a guy named number 40 playing fullback. Beetham. He had a pancake in this game and a lot of good blocks. I mean, I don't know who he's a quarterback transfer from Illinois.
Well, he was a quarterback his first year at Illinois. He was a PWO, and then he transferred here and has been a tight end since. Illinois actually moved to a tight end at Illinois.
But he had a really impressive game, I thought, blocking, and another number 40, a guy named Bovin, did a nice job on the kick. He had a huge stick on a kickoff, and another.
It's actually an ostentatiously French pronunciation. It's Wavon.
Okay.
That Michigan football, they put him out there as can you explain this play, because they do this every week, and they're like, well, let's give this guy some love. And so he's like, please pronounce your name, and he said that, and then they go to the clip of Benetti calling him boyfriend. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like, all right,
Pronouncing like Maurice Chevalier, like
for the first time ever, I'm going to be more accurate about a pronunciation of a name than Jason Benetti. And to be fair, it's not like Jason Benetti is like, all right, I got to get to a name number 74 on the travel roster and get this one right. So,
Well, while we're on guys with numbers in the 40s, Max Bredesen has
Yeah.
been a major difference on this offense. Maybe the best fullback Harbaugh's had here, I think.
I'd say Siona Huma has an argument because he was also a runner, but as a blocker, I believe so. On our podcast, I had to have you guys remind me of Kevin Dudley's name.
Yes.
Kevin Dudley was
32.
the best blocker.
I
at
can't believe you
fullback.
forgot about Kevin Dudley. He's
Well,
like
I didn't forget
MGoBlog
about Kevin
superstar.
Dudley, but like I forgot his name because it's been like 10 years.
Well, he had that game against Notre Dame where he was just unbelievable a few years back, and yeah, he was a fine blocker.
Yeah,
See,
and
I agree with you bringing him up though, because you know
Yeah.
Dudley or any of the other fullbacks that we talk about, you know, you talk about them being like pile driver, straight ahead, ISO, you know, being that kind of blocker. You see this incarnation of the fullback or the move guy be different. Like you got to be able to come
Yeah.
across the formation,
Mhm.
find work. Sometimes you aren't even blocking the guy at the line of scrimmage. You're going around him and finding work in the alley, and he is blocking guys consistently.
Yes.
Consistently.
Yes.
And I gotta tell you, I mean, I love Bench Mason as a guy, but he had problems in space. This dude doesn't have problems in space.
No, and that's a great point. His agility is really good for a guy his shape and size. And I mean, you're exactly right. His intelligence is great on I called it a belly play, the Mullings touchdown. He sees that he doesn't have anybody to the inside, so he flares out, picks off a corner, and that's it for the play. So, you know, I feel like he's probably the best fullback I've charted. And he's a redshirt sophomore. So we get a lot more of Max Bredesen, and that's great. Last week, I was curious, so I looked up run blocking grades for tight ends on Pro Football Focus. Bredesen was number 3 nationally, and AJ Barner was number 5. So,
Yeah.
I mean, can you imagine being Jim Harbaugh and it's like, okay, we got Colston Loveland, that's great, but we've also got like 2 of the best blocking tight ends in the country, and I know that like, you know, Morris was just like, oh no.
That's why that's why they can run duo, because you have tight ends that can actually block. And how many teams have tight ends that can actually block? So because Michigan does, and they have more than, I mean, they go 4 deep at the position. They're gonna give you every version of a duo you've ever seen. They came out with a double wing duo from shotgun and hit it for a touchdown with the 3rd string running back. Like, what do you want to do? Because we got you. That's because we have tight ends. Is what Michigan is saying.
Speaking of the 3rd string
Yes.
running back, we got to talk about Khalil Mullins.
Yes.
We have to. Yes, we do.
Because like that touchdown was probably his least impressive run of the day. Because I think that he knew that he was going to be attacking backside, and he shifts smoothly to that gap, but then he just runs through an arm tackle. He re-gapped on a short yardage play between a guard and a tackle on a play that was supposed to go upfield, got through a defensive end tackle, gained 6 yards. And I'm just like, that is a 240-pound dude. He is not supposed to have feet like that.
Well, last week, Brian, you said that you thought Michigan had something with Mullings, with, you know, the data point caveat. But now, what do you think? I mean, I'm thinking he's the real deal as a running back.
I mean, I think he's the starter next year easily.
That's what I think.
Like, I mean, I think he can be a full-time college running back and a very good one. And I always go back to the fact that when Michigan was recruiting him, the main competition was Wisconsin and Notre Dame, who both wanted him to play running back. So if you're talking about like a Paul Chryst Wisconsin team that's like, we want this guy to play running back, okay, I'm 90% of the way sold. And given what we've seen from him the last 2 weeks, I'm on board. I think he's going to be a beast next year, like Toby Gerhart.
Yeah, and you got to marvel at. I think I said this last week, maybe not on this show. but he had almost as rough a playoff game as JJ McCarthy. And that's a recipe for a guy to go in the shell. And this dude just got better and a lot better, a
Yeah.
lot better. So
Well, he got to be a full-time running back for this offseason for the first time. And you add that into what he's already doing, given the fact that he was playing linebacker a lot. Like, I think he's still got upside to explore. So that's a huge development for next year.
yeah.
I just
All
want
right.
to support him really quickly. That was a fullback dive, which I've talked to fullbacks before. So you have to practice that play a gazillion times, and the handoff comes so fast that he fumbled on against TCU. Like they should not have called that play for him at that point. That play.
Oh, I agree.
You
They
got to
shouldn't
rep
have
that
caught
too many
really
times.
special either.
Yeah.
I agree. Bad calls.
Yeah.
I'm not saying those were the right calls, but
I'm not gonna like put that on like the great Mullings file of like things that you have to remember about him. That was a bad situation for him.
mentally for him though, you could see how that could put you in a hole, and it didn't
Yeah.
put him in a hole. So I give that dude a lot of credit for getting up off the mat, because I don't blame JJ for the second interception. The second pick six. I don't blame him for that, but he threw it. And you gotta recover from it, right? So one of those things. We need to talk some defense. We'll do that on the other side. Stay tuned. More MGoBlog Roundtable here on the Michigan Insider on Sports Talk 1050 WTKA, The Ticket.
Clear on the radio.
Yeah, man. There was another Mullings run where he got a linebacker totally unblocked to him and just obliterated him.
I know that hurt.
I was just like, let's go.
Yeah, the short yardage one is the one that stuck out to me because like you've seen that dive so many times from us, right?
They were all short yardage. You got to specify.
Okay, yeah, the one you were talking about earlier where he gets 6 yards.
Oh
You've
yeah,
seen that dive so many times, and then like it's just a subtle shift with his feet, and all of a sudden he's
he's in another gap, and
Yeah.
I was like, I can't believe this guy is 240 pounds and hasn't been a full-time running back. I was just like,
Yeah.
Oh, Brandon Minor. I didn't think of Brandon Minor.
I think he's more agile than Brandon Minor.
I do too. I think his feet are better than Brandon's. I think Brandon is probably faster in a straight line.
Yeah, probably. I mean, I don't know. Mullings can get going. Like,
yeah,
he's-
that was the one thing he could do as a linebacker is he could zip.
Yeah, he can. I don't. Brandon was pretty fast.
Yeah, he was, but I mean, I think Mullings, his contact balance is also pretty good, and Minor was. I guess Minor was pretty. Yeah, Minor's a good comp. I think he's better though.
I mean,
think his feet are definitely.
You got to
better.
see
His feet
Mullings
are-
like carry a couple guys. Like if he wears a Minnesota player as a cape this week,
Well,
then we can start talking.
He consistently gets into those rugby scrums where it's just like, I'm gonna stay up until my offensive lineman can start pushing me, and then he gains another 4 yards. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, if next year's offensive line is anywhere near as proficient at duo type stuff as this one is, like you add that to the equation, and it's just going to be real tough for teams to not give up 5 yards a pop.
Along those lines, can they redshirt? Is Raheem Anderson? Is that what's going on? Is he going to come back? I loved Raheem in the spring game.
Yeah.
I
he
mean,
was
I
good.
thought
They
he
talked
was a
about him a lot.
monster.
They talked about him a lot in the offseason. A lot. But you know what in retrospect, what I think that had to do with was, Drake Nugent didn't really practice.
Yeah.
Like once Drake Nugent started practicing in fall camp, they were like, this dude he's Olu all over again. So,
Well, one interesting thing that I saw is that they had Gentry playing left tackle late in this game. And before he's been at guard, I actually misattributed some of this because 79, I was like, oh, that's Gentry. It's actually Percy who's playing guard. So to me, that says that Gentry is next up at left tackle next year.
That's huge.
And
they said with him coming in, they had to teach him he had never passed that before. Wait,
what?
Yeah, that was what was said to me. He's never passed that before. Now it's not like he literally never passed that, but he didn't do it a lot.
Right.
So they had to teach him to pass block.
So might Raheem move over to guard and play him with El Hadi at guard
and put Crippen in the middle? I mean, that's not a bad line.
That would be my guess because I thought they remove Atterbury, right? And to me, I'm like, all right, that feels like they're
coming back in about 10 seconds, guys.
Anderson at guard for next year.
Yeah,
Who knows?
we don't know, but it seems like logical.
And back on radio in 5, 4, 3.
And we are back here on the Michigan Insider, Sports Talk 1050 WTKA, online at WTK.com. Before we get back to the roundtable, I want to tell you about the great deals to be had at Brighton Ford. Get on board with Brighton Ford by going to BrightonFord.com. Call 1-800-NEW-FORD or make it out to the lot at 8240 West Grand River Avenue in Brighton, Michigan. When you do, John Cuter and his great crew will take awesome care of you with great deals like the one on the 2023 F-150, $274 a month with $3,500 down, or $402 a month with $500 down. Or how about the 2023 Bronco Sport Big Bend? Get into that SUV for $274 a month, $3,500 down, or $399 a month with $500 down. And last but not least, the 2023 Explorer XLT Max, $408 a month with $3,500 down, $533 a month with $500 down. For those and other great deals, get on board with Brighton Ford. Go to BrightonFord.com. Call 1-800-NEW-FORD. Make it out to the lot at 8240 West Grand River Avenue in Brighton, Michigan. Let's talk defense, Brian Cook. What did you make of the Wolverines' defensive effort against the Cornhuskers?
Well, I named Chris Jenkins my number one trusted friend and known agent of the week, even though he only had 2 tackles, because I looked at the game and I was like, this guy's never blocked. And I said Seth would probably come up with some examples, counterexamples. He's like, he got blocked once in the first half.
Once, and it was like on a play that didn't matter. It was that QB draw where like he's going upfield and he thinks he's going to get a sack, and then all of a sudden the tackle turns around on him and they get to run. Like, congratulations, you blocked Chris Jenkins one time at the end of the half on a drive that wasn't getting anywhere. He's just unblockable, and like they ran away from him as much as they could. When they tried to run at him, one of them was an option on him that he blows up because he just figures out what's happening and gets over. There's not that many snaps. So like when I went and go tally it up, like my numbers were not super high. But then you look and they're doing it on like 20 snaps, and you're like, in a normal game, this would have been like a Aiden Hutchinson, Brandon Graham level of play. And you have to keep in mind that Nebraska's offensive line is not very good. And at one point, like, we thought they were destroying this guy, Kirk Corcoran, who is the worst, literally the worst offensive tackle in the country, according to Pro Football Focus.
Pass protection.
And pass protection.
Yeah.
And then he goes out. So a couple of the sacks that they had, and then like Jalen Harrell should have been sacked when he was just getting held to death. Like, all of those were against Turner Corcoran's backup. So it was like, yeah. So
that's
you're
a
gonna
terrifying
have to,
concept.
yeah, you're gonna have to get the guy who can't beat out Turner Corcoran for a job. I think the guy was a true freshman. So you have to give the discount. One guy you don't have to give the discount to because he was doing it on the other side, and like the speed that he gets off with, Derek Moore, is really rounding into a star. He's got that dip where that's the difference, right? Like, you can't make that up. If you can get your shoulder low, there's really no way for them to get a purchase on you, and you can get around the offensive tackle. And the other guy wasn't that good. He wasn't Corcoran, and
he's okay. Like, he's decent.
Yeah.
And Bryce Benhart, and the sack he had was like teach tape for dipping around the corner. And at his size, with his recruiting profile, you just need to start seeing that periodically, and then you start seeing it consistently, and then you have David Ojabo.
Yeah. And you got those long arms too. So like, he gets around, even if he misses, he can really mess up the quarterback. It's like, he doesn't have to be that close to the quarterback to get his hand on the football.
Yeah. If there's a concern coming out of this game, isn't it in the secondary? I mean, you've had Will Johnson hurt, you've had Rod Moore hurt. Now it looks like Sandra still might not be 100% either. And I mean, are you guys concerned a bit about the secondary at this point?
Yeah, you have to be, right? Like, we saw the pass where Quentin Johnson got a PBU on a batted ball at the line. I think Johnson got toasted on that, and that was going to be a catch and run after that. And a couple of the other slants and stuff I thought were defensive ends dropping into bad windows, but Seth's the one who charted it, so I don't know if that's
I kind of wondered, because we'd watched a bunch of Nebraska beforehand.
Wait, Sam was going to say something that confirms or disconfirms our suspicions.
Okay, go ahead, Sam.
That's exactly right.
Okay.
You had a couple of defensive ends who, as far as being edge droppers, are green. Both Derek Moore and
Mhm.
Josiah Stewart struggled in that area, and I think that if it's Braden McGregor or
Corral.
Jalen Harrell.
Jalen Harrell,
Yeah.
if it's one of those guys who we've seen show up in flashing coverage. I mean, you think about the Ohio State game alone, both of those guys as edge droppers were outstanding. Well, that's something that they got to bring these two guys up to speed in. So I felt kind of like, and I talked to Vance about it, it felt kind of like they were experimenting with that. Like, we got to work on this.
Yeah.
Got to
Mhm.
work on our edge drops, right? And, you saw where that work needs to come. And then as far as the secondary is concerned, you can see the coaches kind of acknowledging that they need some work there. Because think about late in the game on that long touchdown run, they had the secondary starters in the secondary out
Mhm.
there. Rod Moore was out there. Josh Wallace was out there. That's a sign that, okay, we need some reps
Yeah.
in the secondary. So
They were doing some weird things with nickel. They had Rod Moore playing nickel. I didn't have any negatives for Rod Moore in this game, actually. I didn't have very much play for him. He was just kind of off screen most of the time.
Well, Seth, after
Yeah.
the game, Harbaugh said that Sanders still was hurt,
Yeah.
so that would
Yeah,
explain why they've got contingency plans at nickel.
Yeah, but they were working they were trying different contingency plans, is what I was saying. So
Yeah.
Rod Moore is the first one, who had a couple plays. They were just like +1s for our charting. They weren't like, you need to see this, but they were the kind of things that Peppers was doing in 2016, where he hangs back, waits till they declare what they're doing, and uses his speed to get to the spot. And one time he beats a pulling guard and actually stalemates that guy. Another time he just they're going to try to option him, and he just waits for the guy to go by, the blocker to go by him, and then he destroys a jet sweep, or an end around. So Moore looked fine. I think that he could play that position if they need him to do it. Wallace, they tried in there a whole bunch. Definitely not Samer still in that position. And then on the big touchdown, I didn't think Moore was at fault at all. The reason why he ends up on screen is he's covering a slot receiver on the other side of the field, and then he's just the only other person, and he's the only one who made up any ground on that guy. And then I looked the guy up, and apparently he's that Baylor transfer they had, who's just like 100% speed. That's the only thing they talk about, and he's like the Jackson Hallam of the of football. So
I wasn't mentioning Rod as being at fault. I was mentioning that he's on the field.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
they're up 45-0, right? And he's still on the field. Josh Wallace is still on the field. That late in the game, when the offensive guys, all the starters are on the bench.
Well,
Right.
except
that play was mostly Trey Pierce, who's a true freshman defensive tackle.
Well, he
And I
was
think
doubled
Nebraska-
on that, wasn't he?
I mean, it's not really important.
I just
like,
think
with their third
Nebraska's
string.
line were just like they got beat up by they're spending all day against Chris Jenkins and Kenneth Grant, and Benny is destroying them. He had one of his best games, and they finally get a chance to block someone, and they just took him for a ride.
Well, to Sam's point, it kind of felt like those Rod Moore snaps were the equivalent of the Donovan Edwards carries late in the game, where it's like we know this guy can play, but he's been out in fall camp. He's a little rusty. Let's get him some live fire snaps.
Yeah. Will Johnson was the one I was a little bit more concerned about because you talked about the slant on him, the deep, it was, you can call it a dig or a post. It was kind of in between where
Wasn't that more on?
Stab was
I think that's more on Sab, right?
It's on Sab, but Sab, I mean, at that point you're up 28-0 and you're just kind of playing. I understand why Sab would rather give up the catch than possibly let the guy behind him. I still gave him -2 on it. But Will Johnson, he's supposed to be in that guy's pocket, and he's just nowhere near him. And you have to at least be close enough to have an attempt to tackle, and then he's just trying to knock the ball out. And it probably had more to do with the time of the game and the state of the game at that point. But I'm waiting for Will Johnson to give us the star things, and you're not seeing it yet.
Yeah, that's why these next 4 games before Penn State are not. I mean, as much as they are like slabs of meat to be grilled by Michigan. These are important games for some of the guys who clearly are trying to get on track. Whether you're talking about Donovan, you're talking about guys in the secondary who missed the early part of the season. They need to. This is their preseason. The other guys had their preseason already. This is their preseason now to get them on track. So when you get to Penn State, Maryland, and Ohio State, those guys are ready to play the form.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And
I mean, Minnesota's got a receiver, so you're gonna have to show up today, and we'll see. Maybe that's what Will needed. He needs somebody he can point to and be like, okay, you're on this guy. Let's go get him.
That's a good segue. Tell me about the Gophers, guys, because I think they are not as good as I expected them to be so far.
No, I mean, they did have that game against Nebraska where they couldn't run the ball at all, and then Darius Taylor, I believe is his name, is a freshman actually from Michigan, kind of gets that Mike Hart thing where in game 2 he immediately it's like, okay, this is our starter now, and their ground game improves massively. So at the beginning of the season, I thought they'd really lost their identity. Turns out that's not the case, but Kalikmanis is really just not quite at the level that they need, and their defense, which has been very good the past few seasons, seems to be lacking a playmaker or two.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
offensively, they've got some major guard problems. They've been every time they try to take one guy out, the other guy is worse, and they put the other guy in. So they're rotating between 4 guards right now. One of them, Tyler Cooper, is the only one who sticks around, and the other guys are whoever they put in is just getting murdered. And it's kind of messing up everything they do because they have different skills, and so it's like, are you going to put in the one that's going to get Kalikmanis killed, or are you going to put in the one that just cannot, identify somebody to block? The receiver, Daniel Jackson, I think anyone who watched that game against Nebraska recognized that guy. Flex always got a receiver, right? His 80-year-old Chris Ottman-Bell is injured, so we're not going to see him again.
I mean, Span Ford's still around too. I can't believe that. That's insane.
I know. They have a bunch of guys. I thought about, remember, on the chart one time I put all these white beards on Wisconsin because every one of them was a 5th-year senior. These guys are like 6th-year seniors. I think we charted 6 6th-years just on the offense. So they've got a lot of old guys on that team. And then defensively, they're I don't know. Tyler Nubin's a dude, and they lost some guys, and I think that they just not been able to replace them. So just stay away from number 27. You'll be fine.
Did you guys see any of their game against Northwestern? I mean, all I know is they were way ahead and then lost in overtime, which is pretty remarkable because I don't think Northwestern is a particularly good team. The statistically, from my small little single variable data check, which seems to work pretty well, they're a slightly below average team. Michigan is obviously way above average, so there's a pretty massive difference on the data between Minnesota and Michigan at this point. The one thing about Nebraska, I kind of like Harburg. I mean, he's a sophomore. I think he has some potential there going forward.
They talked about coming out of there and needing to give Jeff Sims some more.
Really? I thought Harburg played okay, really, given what he, the problems he had in the Michigan defense. I kind of feel badly, and I'm sort of rooting for him. The last couple of years I've been to Purdue where the fans ignored you, and that's fine, and Iowa where they sort of ignore you, but they're very civil, and Northwestern where they're pretty okay. But this place is something else. It's the best fan base. I mean, the rest of the Big Ten could learn from the Nebraska fans how to treat other people. Because that's the best fan base I've ever seen by far. It isn't even close. So it's hard for me not to root for them. But I liked Harburg a bit. I think he's probably a better quarterback than what's his name, Kaliamakis.
Anyway. What I find surprising is how the bloom has fallen off the rose for PJ Fleck. I mean, he was one of the young darlings in coaching, and now Minnesota fans are begging Michigan State to look at him. And you look at Michigan State list, and PJ Fleck isn't on him.
Well, that's we'll get into that some other time. I mean, if you're Minnesota, like, PJ Fleck has given your program an identity. They've won a solid number of games. You're a consistent bowl team, and you're Minnesota. Like,
right?
Realistically, this is as good as it gets.
I've been saying the same thing.
I think he's less fun to play for than he was billed as. The other thing is just weird to me that they have his offensive coordinator is Greg Harbaugh, spelled exactly like Harbaugh. I didn't know you were allowed to do this, but apparently he's related to another Harbaugh who played for Michigan in like the 30s or 40s. He was also completely not related to the Harbaughs, but they still spell it the same way.
Well, that's I guess they can't play special teams plays together.
No, and then their defensive coordinator is Joe Rossi, who wasn't the defensive coordinator for Rutgers in 2016. He was the defensive coordinator who built that Rutgers team under Chris Ash, and then got fired from Rutgers, and he's been at Minnesota ever since. So that's the coaching staff, and that's the point I wanted to get to. He's been kind of recruiting coaches because they come with players, and you got a couple guys from Western when he got Harbaugh back, who had been on his staff at Western Michigan, and he recruited Rossi years ago and got a player with him, and it seems to be kind of their MO that like anytime they get a guy, they're trying to get a transfer or something more than a coach, and the coaching feels like it's lacking on that team right now.
Well, it just looks like, going over their Pro Football Focus grades, that their defensive linemen are just guys. Like, there's not really a standout in terms of either pass rush or run defense. And the guys who seem to grade out the best are not starters, so you kind of feel like they're probably getting graded against backups late in games. So it feels like, unless Minnesota overcommits to the run game, Michigan's going to run it down their throats, and then we've seen what JJ's able to do against teams that overcommit to the run game. So it doesn't seem like this is going to be the defense that slows Michigan down.
Yeah, man. Yeah. So you look around, and fellas, I don't say this to be mean, but Iowa lost Cade McNamara for the season, and I don't think their chances of winning the West are any worse because the West is that bad. The West is terrible. Watching that game. And so they're all still in it. Like Minnesota, as bad as I think they are, and Craig, I didn't watch the game, but we were following it. They were up by 21. They were up by 3 touchdowns heading into the fourth quarter and got beat. They gave up 21 fourth quarter points and lost in overtime. That's Minnesota. And that team can still win the West. Iowa can still win the West. You know, all these teams can still win the West.
Rutgers can win the West. That was my hot take on they could. They're going to Wisconsin this week. If they beat Wisconsin, Rutgers is better than anybody in the West. The one thing I want to point out about Iowa is Iowa backup quarterbacks are almost always better than the starter. Because Kirk Ferentz picks whoever's going to like throw the shortest, right? He's like, okay, throw to my tight ends for 3 yards. And whoever's doing that gets the starting job. And then the backup is like the guy who wants to go long, who wants to break the rules. So I don't know. Maybe Cade was not the answer for them after all.
It feels like Wisconsin is pretty much a walk-in in the West, aren't they? I mean,
is favorite.
Yeah.
I mean,
I don't think they're particularly good, but they do have Braylon Allen, which is one more Braylon Allen the rest of the division has.
Right.
I could have said it better myself. Right. They're the best of a bad bunch. And I just wonder, as we look at, I don't know if I ask you guys, I get all the things mixed up. My point in bringing that up is, with the Big Ten being as bad as it is there a good shot of a one-loss Big Ten team being in the playoff like we saw happen last year? Or do you better win it, and that's the only way you're getting in?
I really doubt it, because this year you have real contenders in the ACC and the Big 12, and the Pac-12. So you got Texas and Oklahoma. Probably one of those is going to make it. I think it would be really hard at this point for the Pac-12 not to get a representative. And then Florida State, it could be a situation where you're leaving out an undefeated team. Now, it's probably not going to happen, but this isn't the year where a non-champion is likely to make the playoff.
It's also possible you have 5 one-loss teams, in which case you're going to have, quite a bit of angst. But
if that's the case, then the one-loss teams that won their conferences will go.
I think that's probably right. Yeah.
Yeah. Michigan can afford to lose to Penn State and beat Ohio State, win the Big Ten championship, and go to that could happen. But Or I mean, if you lose to Minnesota and then like
Yeah.
and then run the table, like that kind of thing would happen.
But you got to win the league, right? That's
Yeah.
pretty much it. I think this
Yeah,
year.
the winner of the loser of Michigan Ohio State is probably not going to the playoffs this year.
Yeah,
So
I
whole damn
agree
thing.
with that. I think that seems realistic, which will be a major change next year where you'll have 12 teams and
All right.
teams with multiple losses perhaps getting
So-
in.
So in the 2 minutes left, fellas, Ohio State, Maryland gave them a game last year. What do you make of that game this year in Columbus?
I mean, I don't know. Like, I want to say it's going to be a game, but I feel like if I do say that, I am dooming the Maryland Terrapins. So I'm going to say it's going to be 78-0 Ohio State.
Little
I mean,
reverse juju there.
Maryland,
Yeah.
if they play, they'd be great on 7-on-7, and it'll be interesting to see what happens against the Ohio State secondary.
Okay,
'cause
so
there's-
one interesting thing
Yeah.
is that one of the reasons Ohio State's defense has been very good this year is they are not allowing short yardage conversions on the ground, which is Maryland might not have to attempt. And also, Ohio State is 126 nationally at converting short yardage on the ground because they're soft.
Mm.
And Maryland's probably going to be able to get them off the field if they don't give up super long touchdowns to Marvin Harrison Jr. So,
Yeah.
like, maybe 78-0 was a little aggressive.
Well, can Roman Hemby do what Audric Estime was doing to him?
No,
And just busting them up.
absolutely not. There's no way, because Notre Dame's offensive line is two other levels above Maryland's. But they have some pieces. It'll be a test.
Yeah. All right. We got to get out of here. Another great roundtable. Folks, we'll see you tomorrow live from Grand Traverse Resort and Spa here on the Michigan Insider on Sports Talk 1050 WTK.